Hello, hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome. This is the Steve Funds workshop on releasing imposter phenomenon. Thank you guys for joining. Let's go. Let's give it maybe a minute or so for folks to settle in, get situated. We have a great conversation today on imposter phenomenon. I hope you guys are fastening your seatbelts because it's going to be a really nice ride. But please settle in. While you're doing that, we'd love to hear from where you're coming from, where you're watching from. So please shout out your state, your city, agency, school, whatever you want. Please go ahead and share that in the chat. And then we'll just do that for a few minutes, and then we'll get started, guys. Thank you for joining. Again, welcome everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to those on our East Coast, West Coast, in the middle, down south. Thank you guys for joining. This is the Steve Funds workshop on releasing imposter phenomenon. We have a great conversation ahead of us today. We're going to take a few more moments for folks to settle in. While you're getting situated, please feel free to use the chat, share where you're from, where you're watching from, where you're representing, city, state, school, organization, frat, sorority, whatever you want. Please share. Feel free to share that with us. We'd love to hear from you. All right. All right. All right. Okay. Welcome again, guys. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Stephen Smith. I am an advisor with the Steve Fund. We are lucky to have today a conversation about releasing imposter phenomenon. The Steve Fund, for those that aren't familiar, the Steve Fund is the nation's leading organization focused exclusively on supporting the mental health and emotional well-being of our young people of color. Um, we offer an array of different services, including seminars, workshops, consultations, institutional based programming, all again for the aim of not just supporting, but prioritizing the needs, the emotional and mental health needs of young people of color. So glad that you're able to join us for one of our events. The event that we're doing today is part of our Medical Students of Color initiative, and it's an initiative focused exclusively on helping medical students of color. We know that their academic journey often presents some unique challenges and opportunities, but also some unique challenges. So the Steve Fund has developed this initiative to provide a ton of different events, ton of different programming that will aim to both provide support and give them some concrete tools to reach their goals. All right. So within this Medical Students of Color initiative, we will be having monthly conversations. We'll be having these workshops as you're going to listen in on today. We'll also be hosting a series of wellness circles for folks that are interested. So be on the lookout for those events. We'll definitely post some of those on our website. Okay. All right. So thank you guys again. While before I introduce our speaker, our presenter for today, I want to just give a quick reminder. This is a format where we really encourage folks to chime in. So please utilize your chat features. We'll definitely post some questions for you guys to answer, but feel free to add comments along the way. One of those comments again is to shout out where you're coming from, where you're watching from. We love to hear from you and love to see who's in the room. Okay. All right, without further ado, let me get to today's conversation. I have the honor of introducing our presenter for today's workshop. It's Tiana Brawley. She's a mental health consultant with the Steve Fund, but she wears a ton of different hats. She's affectionately known in her community as Wellness Bay, loving it. She's a holistic mental health practitioner, founder, and wellness coach, consultant and associate therapist. Tiana's passions lie in helping people seek their higher purpose through radical healing and collective care. Her practice is rooted in the background and training as a registered clinical therapist. Tiana is a fierce advocate for accessible and relatable wellness services and practices for Black and Brown communities, LGBTQIA plus queer folks, low income, and oppressed communities. Soul free wellness is the manifestation of her commitment to uplifting and amplifying wellness for all. I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better speaker to start us off with this workshop. And I'll definitely turn it over to Tiana. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining and speaking to the folks out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you for having me in this conversation today. I'm really excited to connect with not only medical students of color, but prospective students who are interested in the medical field or the STEM field, as well as folks who support them. So this is going to be a really robust conversation around imposter phenomenon, and excited to dive in with you all today. So again, as Stephen introduced, my name is Tiana, and I'm the founder of Soul Free Wellness. I'm also a wellness coach and facilitator, as well as an associate therapist in the Bay Area. So anyone from the Bay Area would love to hear from you. And currently, I am the mental health specialist with the STE Fund. So today I will be bringing all of my different trainings and skills and tools to have our conversation today about imposter phenomenon. So thank you so much for being here and again having me. So some of our intentions for today, I'd just like to set the stage, is that we're going to define and explore the roots of imposter phenomenon. We're going to talk about why we call it imposter phenomenon today. We're going to discuss and reflect on the mental health impact of imposter phenomenon for medical students of color. And if you don't identify as a medical student of color, you'll identify with this concept anyway. We're going to explore new skills and tools to release this feeling of imposter phenomenon. And most of all, empower your voice and presence as a medical student of color or as a student of color or supportive of students of color in any ways. Okay, next slide. So how you can show up today, this format might be a little bit different from what might be here up above, but really the point is we want to hear from you. If you want to engage in the chat, this is your opportunity to take up space, to chime in. This is the format where I would love your engagement, as we'll have a couple of questions. We'll have a couple of spaces to insert some emojis. So please get into it, take up space in this presentation, and ask meaningful questions because there will be time for Q&A. Next slide. Okay, so again, I won't be seeing you on video. So the opportunities to engage are through the chat. And if you have any questions, you can let someone from the STE Fund know if you have any private questions. And there is an opportunity for questions. You could type those questions in the chat, and there will be a survey at the end. A survey at the end because we want to hear your thoughts. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to start with a quote, and I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with who Maya Angelou is. But let's get into one thing that she said that really stuck with me. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. I imagine that it's hard to sit with like Maya Angelou actually doubted herself, right? But this is a very familiar feeling to all of us in some way or another, right? So this is what ignites our conversation about imposter phenomenon, because that's exactly what Maya Angelou was feeling in this moment, right? So this is going to help us in framing what imposter phenomenon feels like and what it means. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to watch a short video that really contextualizes imposter phenomenon, what it means, how it shows up, and I hope that you all relate to this information in some way. Okay?
Even after writing 11 books and winning several prestigious awards, Maya Angelou couldn't escape the nagging doubt that she hadn't really earned her accomplishments. Albert Einstein experienced something similar. He described himself as an involuntary swindler whose work didn't deserve as much attention as it had received. Accomplishments at the level of Angelou's or Einstein's are rare, but their feeling of fraudulence is extremely common. Why can't so many of us shake feelings that we haven't earned our accomplishments, or that our ideas and skills aren't worthy of others' attention? Psychologist Pauline Rose Clance was the first to study this unwarranted sense of insecurity. In her work as a therapist, she noticed many of her undergraduate patients shared a concern. Though they had high grades, they didn't believe they deserved their spots at the university. Some even believed their acceptance had been an admissions error. While Clance knew these fears were unfounded, she could also remember feeling the exact same way in graduate school. She and her patients experienced something that goes by a number of names: imposter phenomenon, imposter experience, and imposter syndrome. Together with colleague Suzanne Imes, Clance first studied imposterism in female college students and faculty. Their work established pervasive feelings of fraudulence in this group. Since that first study, the same thing has been established across gender, race, age, and a huge range of occupations, though it may be more prevalent and disproportionately affect the experiences of underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. To call it a syndrome is to downplay how universal it is. It's not a disease or an abnormality, and it isn't necessarily tied to depression, anxiety, or self-esteem. Where do these feelings of fraudulence come from? People who are highly skilled or accomplished tend to think others are just as skilled. This can spiral into feelings that they don't deserve accolades and opportunities over other people. And as Angelou and Einstein experienced, there's often no threshold of accomplishment that puts these feelings to rest. Feelings of imposterism aren't restricted to highly skilled individuals either. Everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance, where we each doubt ourselves privately, but believe we're alone in thinking that way, because no one else voices their doubts. Since it's tough to really know how hard our peers work, how difficult they find certain tasks, or how much they doubt themselves, there's no easy way to dismiss feelings that we're less capable than the people around us. Intense feelings of imposterism can prevent people from sharing their great ideas or applying for jobs and programs where they'd excel. At least so far, the most surefire way to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. Many people suffering from imposter syndrome are afraid that if they ask about their performance, their fears will be confirmed. And even when they receive positive feedback, it often fails to ease feelings of fraudulence. But on the other hand, hearing that an advisor or mentor has experienced feelings of imposterism can help relieve those feelings. The same goes for peers. Even simply finding out there's a term for these feelings can be an incredible relief. Once you're aware of the phenomenon, you can combat your own imposter syndrome by collecting and revisiting positive feedback. One scientist who kept blaming herself for problems in her lab started to document the causes every time something went wrong. Eventually, she realized most of the problems came from equipment failure and came to recognize her own competence. We may never be able to banish these feelings entirely, but we can have open conversations about academic or professional challenges. With increasing awareness of how common these experiences are, perhaps we can feel freer to be frank about our feelings and build confidence in some simple truths. You have talent, you are capable, and you belong. Everyone can use a little extra kick of confidence sometimes. Find out some tips and tricks for boosting yours.
Yes, you are confident, you are capable, and you belong. Right. So I hope that this video resonated with you in some way. I'm not sure if I'm seeing any comments on my end, but I'd be curious to know, what did you learn from the video today? All right, I'll pause here in case there's comments, in case you're doing some more reflection. Anything new that you learned from this video today? Okay, I don't see any comments. So this is just a question to hold for yourself and a resource, right? Because this video was able to define imposter phenomenon and its roots, right? So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So, to help us break down some terms, in the video, they refer to both imposter syndrome and imposter phenomenon, right? But we're choosing to center on imposter phenomenon. Now, why is that? Imposter phenomenon versus imposter syndrome. Syndrome makes the feeling, that imposter feeling, feel like something's wrong, like it's a part of a diagnosis or medical condition, when really imposter phenomenon talks about it as a universal experience that we all experience, and it's ongoing, hence the name phenomenon, right? So this is something that I just wanted to frame for us, that I'll be using imposter phenomenon, and this is how we'll be referring to it as going forward. I do see a comment, so I do want to acknowledge that. It says, I appreciate how the video emphasized that this doesn't have to be a result of anxiety and or depression. Absolutely, right? This can be as a result of, just self-doubt, right? Some fears around failure, some fears around accomplishments, right? So we're going to dive more into that. And I love this comment. So please continue to feel free to chime in, especially as we continue. Thank you for your comment. Okay, next slide. Okay, so why does imposter phenomenon show up? Some of the video hinted at some of these different factors, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper, right? Navigating multiple forms of systemic oppression, right? Whether it's structural, whether it's institutional, right? Racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, ableism, right? Religious oppression, right? All of these different systems can contribute to imposter phenomenon, both consciously and unconsciously. Lack of resources within our communities and homes, right? Maybe we weren't set up for some of the passions and skills and talents that we strive to, right? Because we didn't have the resources. Lack of encouragement in our communities and homes. Think about the lack of representation and role models, right? So, whatever your biggest childhood dreams were, did you see other people who looked like you in those roles, right? Something to question. High achieving work ethic, right? That sense of competition, right? And growing up in a critical environment, right? So, think about in your family, community, or your education system, were you often criticized, right? What did punishment look like? Right? What did other people showing up as confident look like? Right? And was there a critical nature in that? So these are some of the reasons why imposter phenomenon might show up. Next slide. Okay. So there are different subtypes, right? And so the video was able to touch on a couple of these, but we have these different subtypes that span across imposter phenomenon. We have the perfectionist, right? Think about having excessive high standards for yourself, right? Or others. The superhero. This is the person that works harder to measure up to others, right? To show up and show out. The individualist. Asking for help for them could be really hard, right? Because you want to take on everything yourself. The natural genius. Must feeling like you have the natural ability, right, to accomplish tasks or master tasks. And the expert, that fear that you're going to be exposed as inexperienced or unknowledgeable, and that you don't belong in the room, right? So I'm sure many of you identify with one of these subtypes or a couple of these different subtypes, right? So if you can engage in the chat, which subtype do you think that you may fall into when it comes to imposter phenomenon, right? I will admit myself that I tend to lean into the perfectionist, right? And a little bit of the superhero. I think in my, a couple of years ago, I might have had some of the superhero subtype, and I still do with that perfectionist subtype. But I'm going to pause for a second to see where some of you all might feel like you fit in. Which subtype or which couple of subtypes do you fit in? All right, we'll pause here. Feel free to chime into the chat. Don't be shy. This is your opportunity to engage. All right. This is a safe space. So, some of us might be feeling You're putting yourself out there. But again, I shared which subtype I relate to, right? So, and vulnerability is embraced here. Okay, so superhero plus natural genius. Yes. Yes, that makes a lot of sense, right? Working harder to measure up and then also feeling like you need to have some type of natural skill or ability, right? I'll wait for one more comment. Who else? What subtype do you relate to? Okay, it could be a combination, right? Anyone else want to chime in? Right, this is your opportunity to share. Give it 10 more seconds. All right, so hold these subtypes as we continue our conversation. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so again, thinking of the subtypes, right, from the previous slide, think about which statement you might relate to based on the emoji, right? So I have a hard time completing and submitting tasks until I know that there are no mistakes. In the classroom setting, I feel like I need to have the right answer before I speak or that I sound intellectual intelligent. Third statement is I get really frustrated when things don't come naturally to me, right? So, of these statements, whether it's the first one, second one, or third one, the celebration emoji, the shocked emoji, or the thumbs up emoji, which statement do you relate to? You can put 1, 2, or 3 in the chat. Statement 1, statement 2, or statement 3. And thank you for this comment. Someone chimed in that they definitely feel like a perfectionist as a part of the subtypes. Thank you for sharing that. Right. So which statement do you identify with? Statement 1, 2, or 3? And I don't know if you all are able to put emojis in the chat, but if you can, which statement applies to you? And I'll give it a second here. All right, do you have a hard time completing and submitting tasks until you know that there's no mistakes? Sounds a little bit like the perfectionism, right? You feel like you need to have the right answers before you speak. Sounds a little bit like the expert, right? Do you get frustrated when things don't come naturally? Sounds like a little bit of the natural genius, right? Okay. All right, statement 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so I see that someone relates to that second statement, right? Feeling like you have to have the right answer before you speak. I hear that, right? Emphasizing that you want to sound intellectual or intelligent in front of your peers or classmates or your communities, right? Anyone else? Anyone want to chime in with an emoji or statement 1, 2, or 3? What do you relate to? We'll have another round of these, so I definitely want you all to engage. Okay, we'll have 10 seconds here. Okay, let's move on to the next set of statements. Next slide. Okay, so again, emoji 1, 2, or 3. First statement, I have a hard time asking for help. I would prefer to try to work on my assignments, labs, and schoolwork myself before asking for help. Statement 2, I often second guess myself even when I am proud of the work I produced. Okay. Statement 3, I often compare myself to other students and peers in my program, right? Or in my school setting. So which one do you relate to here? Statement 1 with the celebration emoji, statement 2 with the shocked emoji, or statement 3 with the thumbs up emoji? What might you relate to here? This hard time asking for help sounds a lot of like the individualist, right? The second one sounds a little bit like the perfectionist, right? And the third one can be a little bit of a combination of all of them, right? Comparing self to others, feeling like maybe you need to be the expert. Right? I'll give it 10 seconds here if anyone wants to chime in on statement 1, 2, or 3. Okay, I see someone said 1, right? Having a hard time asking for help, preferring to work on your assignments alone before asking, right? So again, Think about what subtype that feels like. And some of these fit into the other ones as well. And that's okay. That just means that imposter phenomenon can be really complex, right? Okay, I'll give it 5 more seconds just in case anyone else wants to chime in. Statement 1, 2, or 3 that may apply to you. Which subtype or which subtypes? Okay. All right, last opportunity. All right, let's move on. Okay. So this is a question I want you to think about, right? So again, you can respond with answer 1, 2, or 3. Within your education setting, program, or community, how often do you talk about imposter phenomenon as a medical student, right? And if you don't identify as a medical student, and maybe you're just a student of color, right? Or maybe you support other students of color, think about this question for yourself. Is it very often? Is it someone often, or is it not talked about at all? Right? Response 1, 2, or 3. And I'll wait in the chat, see if there's any chat responses here. How often do you talk about imposter phenomenon? How often does this come up? Right? 1, 2, or 3. I'll wait in the chat, but this is also something just helpful to think about. You all might be learning a lot of new information right now, and we're just in the beginning. Okay, so I'll give it about 5 more seconds here. You can respond 1, 2, or 3, very often, somewhat often, not talked about enough. Okay, some folks are saying somewhat often. Okay, somewhat often, seeing another number 2 chiming in. Okay, so somewhat often. Okay, better than not talking about it at all. So I'm glad that there are some conversations. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about imposter phenomenon in medical school, and this can also be applicable to whatever program that you might be a part of or supporting with other students. Okay, so make it fit your situation. Okay, so in specific, imposter phenomenon in medical school can look and feel like, so sit with your own experiences, feeling intimidated by classmates, questioning and second guessing your career path, anxiety, intense feel of fear of failure, right? That feeling of isolation and burnout, right? Difficulty receiving praise, fixating on mistakes in assignments and labs, withholding questions or participation, freezing or lacking confidence, right? So I imagine that for those of you who responded in the subtypes, you might be seeing a lot of yourself in some of these feelings that come up around what it can look and feel like, right? Next slide. Okay, so you're not alone. If any of these resonated with you, you're not alone. 97% of all medical students report feelings of imposter phenomenon. 97. So this is across the spectrum, right? Students at predominantly white institutions are 3.9 times more likely to experience intense feelings of imposter feelings, right? That compared to students at HBCUs, historically Black college institutions, right? Medical students of color experience higher rates of depression and anxiety. So I want to stop here. And I know that there was a comment in the beginning that someone shared that imposter phenomenon is not just related to depression and anxiety. Absolutely, right? And these are just some studies and facts and findings that support that imposter phenomenon does impact our mental health, right? So you're not alone in these feelings, but there's a lot to celebrate around being a medical student of color or being a student of color within your institution or your community or space, right? The representation, right, that you're showing up as, the ways in which you're taking up space, right? Intergenerational opportunities in education. So I know that these figures are strong and can be daunting, but I wanted to share what the strengths of being a medical student of color might be, right? And we're going to talk about that as well throughout. This is just some information for you all to sit with, how prevalent imposter phenomenon is. Okay, next slide. Okay, so again, the impact of mental health, that anxiety, depression coming up again, that feeling isolated coming up again, that low sense of self-worth or confidence, right? Which reinforces some of those subtypes. That sense of burnout and exhaustion, feeling angry or irritable, stressed, right? Hopeless or helpless, and struggling with your sense of belonging and identity, right? On top of other complex feelings, or all of these combined together. So this is also how imposter phenomenon can impact mental health. Okay, next slide. So here's another opportunity for us to engage around imposter phenomenon. Are there programs, initiatives, or collectives within your community or educational setting to support medical students of color or students of color, right? So for all of you that said that imposter phenomenon is somewhat talked about, are there programs and initiatives? Number one. Number two, are there some programs and initiatives, but maybe limited? Or three, there are no programs and initiatives at all, right? So is it one, two, or three? I want the folks to chime in who said that imposter phenomenon is somewhat talked about, right? What's coming up? One, two, or three? And we'll pause here. Okay, one, two, or three. Don't be shy. Folks were engaging in the beginning. Yes. Okay, so two, there are some programs and initiatives. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so it sounds like there are some supportive ways to talk about support imposter phenomenon. Okay. Awesome. And for the person who responded, are you open to sharing if you are a medical student or if you are a student? Feel free to type in the chat if you feel comfortable. And we'll give it 5 more seconds here. But yeah, please feel free to chime in the chat if you've answered, if you're a student, how this relates to you. Okay, a conversation during orientation. Okay, so it sounds like you might be a prospective student. Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you for chiming in there. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so I want to give some context into why I want to talk about and share some testimonials. So these are some medical students of color who are sharing about their very specific imposter phenomenon experiences, right? So they're going to talk about, oh, great, thank you for sharing that you're a medical student. So I'm sure a lot of this information is going to apply to you. And a recent PhD grad, awesome. So you all definitely are holding this information. I'm sharing these testimonials, so I want to see if you all connect and relate to some of these experiences, and also to show you that, again, imposter phenomenon is universal, and current students, folks who have graduated, have these feelings. All right, so we're going to jump into Julia Carter, who is going to share about her experience. And they're a little snippeted, so we're cutting to some parts, but again, these are going to be resources that you can always go back to.
Is rampant. It's just something that not everyone discusses. So let's discuss it. So throughout college at Penn State, I didn't really experience imposter syndrome, or if I did, I can't put my finger on it now that I knew what it was or that I really struggled with it. Of course, I had my fair share of challenging experiences and failed tests, but for me, I could always identify where I needed to improve, where I should have studied more, where I should have skipped that party on Saturday night. So there was always something in which I can identify that would have allowed me to do better. So I never had any doubts necessarily that I was competent or that I was smart enough, because I was always performing well. And I never really got too competitive into sports and things like that, because that is another area in which people can experience imposter syndrome. But I never played sports competitively or was in any other situation in which I felt as though I was a fraud or incompetent. So it was mostly academics for me. So undergrad came and went, grad school came and went, and then medical school comes. Woo! Yeah, it's just a completely different ballgame. It's just something you cannot prepare for until you are here and you're living it and trying to make it through. I remember being in orientation for medical school. We had a week of orientation before we started classes, and my dean of student affairs would make the analogy that med school was like eating a stack of pancakes and pancakes just keep coming, and you're eating at first and you're managing, but eventually there's just too many pancakes and your mouth is getting stuffed and all of that. And at first I was like, I love pancakes. I don't know what he's talking about. I can eat as many pancakes as I want, bring it on. But then you start to realize very quickly that med school is just it's the major leagues, major leagues. It's something that I just was not prepared for. And so the pancakes became overwhelming for me. Very quickly into my medical school experience, it was probably about the first test. So the first 2 to 3 weeks of medical school, I was immediately overwhelmed. Don't get me wrong, I was excited to be here and I was like embracing the workload and, at least I'm here. But you don't really get the full picture of what goes on in medical school and how much work it is until you start taking tests and the rhythm starts to pick up. So in the beginning, you're just like getting by. So it wasn't until that first test didn't do well. I passed, but barely. And then the work kept coming. The day after the test, 4 new lectures. The day after, 4 new lectures. So it was like, whoa, they're not slowing down. Like this isn't like undergrad where it's like you're learning one thing. You're in one class all semester. This was like you're juggling 40 lectures in a week and it's like overwhelming. So being overwhelmed doesn't play out well with performance because I couldn't manage everything. Therefore, I wasn't performing well. So the next test comes, I do just as poorly. The next test comes, I maybe do a little bit better, but I wasn't getting my footing. Where imposter syndrome kicked in for me in medical.
Okay, so that was Julia Carter telling about her very real and raw experience about her first couple of weeks in medical school, right? So I want to kick it off with the next video so you get a different perspective. So let's go to that next video.
Hi.
And this is Dr. Beosha Jones and Dr. Sandra Coker. And they have a subscription page on YouTube called Black Girl, White Coat, where they talk to different medical students and folks in the field and just have honest conversations. So I recommend checking them out as well for their perspective. So let's get into their testimonial.
Going through what you're going through. Like, it's great to have friends that are not necessarily pre-med or not necessarily science. And honestly, they give a different type of support, which is essential too. Mm-hmm. Very, 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 very key. But I do think that it's also very important to have people who are doing what you're doing as well, because peer mentorship has been a very big deal for me throughout college and throughout medical school as well. So, you have to have your village, and, you have to have those things that keep you grounded or remind you of your purpose. Like for me, having a very strong sense of who I am and like knowing why I was doing what I was doing was key for me to stay focused. Yeah. Like I just had to have that. And, those are the things that remind you of why you're doing it when the going gets real tough, rough, real, like around the edges, the front, the back, scary. Okay, like very, like when it's girl, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are some things that, like, generally, you think first generation African American, Black and Brown students, what are some struggles that you think they face, particularly with higher education? I think that one of the biggest things is literally just feeling alone, feeling like there aren't necessarily people around you that may be able to understand how you feel or understand what you're going through. Like I remember for me particularly, first year of medical school, and obviously like I got closer to you guys, but this is like week 1 stuff, right? So yeah. I remember being around people who would always talk about like, oh, my dad, grandpa, great grandma, and all this. Like everybody's a doctor. I would like to be this, surgeon person, or I'm going to take over the clinic or whatever. And so, people were very open about that. Yeah. People were very confident in the fact that they are continuing their family lineage.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they weren't necessarily people of color or Black either. So for me, that made me feel like I couldn't voice my background, because that at first made me feel like, I don't want to say inferior because I'm not, but it really made me feel like that imposter syndrome. That's when it's really started to hit, because I was like, well, my great grandmother wasn't, you know, this ENT whatever, or like
there's no family practice waiting for me once I get out of here.
Right. Like I don't have that blueprint that it sounds like these guys already knew what was going on with medical school before they got here. And I'm just like, man, I'm just happy to be here. And so it can definitely feel like I felt isolated a little bit. And
lonely.
It can feel lonely. And sometimes you can feel like, you know, you shouldn't talk about your experiences. You shouldn't talk about your journey, because your journey is not like that. You're not the 8th line doctor in your family. So, you know, like I didn't want to say I felt ashamed, but I felt very sheepish about like my own experiences. So I really kept them to myself. But, you know, when you're keeping all that to yourself on top of now feeling like these people have an edge on you because they have these doctors in their family and they know all this stuff about medical school, it can really, really get inside of your head sometimes.
Definitely. And that feeds into that feeling, being made to feel smaller or inadequate or inferior or just kind of ashamed of your own background in those kind of settings, like you said, feeds into that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck in class for the next how many years or however long you struggle with this, just struggling on top of the like rigor of medical school itself, period. And then you have all these other extra pressures and stresses. I can definitely see how for first generation students, it's alienating and lonely and isolating.
But no, I just like what happened was, you know, I found my tribe. I found people that said, you know, hey, like I felt comfortable asking them questions that, you know, I thought everybody else knew. Or, you know, like I said, the peer mentorship was a very big deal for me. And people that I felt comfortable being myself around. And people that I felt comfortable with venting to, both in and out of medicine. Because like I said, the people who are not going through it, but who continue to support you, those are some real ones.
Vital. Those, they play a vital role.
Major key.
Major key. Yes.
And so, you know, like just once I had my people that continue to uplift me and like show me like, hey, you have a story that's worth hearing. You have, you know, there are strengths and things that you originally thought were weaknesses.
And you deserve this spot just as much as the next person.
Right. You got here.
Yes.
Because you were meant to be here.
Exactly. And
period. Nothing
about the person next to you, your left or your right, will determine how far you go, your success. Only you determine your success.
Absolutely.
You deserve the spot.
We'll strap that here.
Right.
Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, that you don't deserve that spot.
Yeah. We'll end on that note here on the video. Don't let anyone tell you, right, that you don't deserve your spot, right? So we were able to hear from a couple of voices, right? Julia Carter and Dr. Biosha Jones and Dr. Sandra Coker, right? So I imagine that they shared feelings, and I know that there's a medical student in this space that might relate to your experience of imposter phenomenon, right? This might be some of the feelings that they shared might be coming up for you. Julia Carter spoke on her experiences around starting medical school, right? She gave that analogy around pancakes, right? So what is it like to feel like, you know, you're taking on more than you can handle, right? And then with the Black Girl in White Coat video, they talked about those feelings of isolation and the lack of representation and how they felt insecure around how they were presenting and showing up, right? So to our question, the next slide, I'm curious about what was a takeaway from one or both of the testimonials from these medical students of color, right? What's something that stuck with you? If you can jot down or in the chat a couple of words that you know, you want to share. What was a takeaway? What was a gem? What was something you really related to, right? From Julia Carter and Black Girl White Coat, their conversation. And I think you should all both subscribe to their YouTube channels because they talk a lot about combating imposter phenomenon and also talk about their medical school experience. So both folks that you all should follow, right? So I'll wait here and we can reflect on this question. We can sync on this question. What was a major takeaway for you, right? Major takeaway for me was that in the Black Girl White Coat video, they named that once they found their community, once they integrated themselves as a part of mentorship, that's when they started feeling like they belonged, right? So it says a lot about community, right? So I'll pause here and wait for some voices to chime in, especially that medical student. I'm wondering how you're feeling and how this is resonating with you. We'll give it 10 more seconds here. How did this resonate with you? How did the videos land with you? Do you identify with their feelings, their experiences? Think about your first 2 weeks of medical school, if you are in medical school, or the first 2 weeks of your program. All right, 10 more seconds here. Feel free to share. Okay, it's really nice. This is a comment in the chat. It's really nice to see people who look like me and have made it through because there really isn't much support for Black medical student at PWIs. Thank you for sharing that. Right, that's definitely a takeaway, and I'm glad that you're seeing other folks who look like you. So this is the piece around representation, right? Representation, folks speaking out on their experiences, folks saying that I am here, I'm taking up space, me and my community, right? So I hope this is some encouragement to you that other folks are experiencing your similar feelings of imposter phenomenon and beyond, right? You are not alone. You're not alone. Thank you so much for your comment. And I'll pause for a second just in case someone else wants to chime in. You know, this is your opportunity. Take up space, right? Take up space in this conversation. Yeah, and remember to subscribe to their YouTube channels. They're really, really good. Okay, 5 more seconds. This is your time. I know that recent PhD grad student or graduate, feel free to chime in too if you resonated with those feelings. Okay, and we'll move on, and I'll answer some of chime in on some of the chats. Okay, and what you're sharing. So we're just going to take a little stretch. I know this is a lot of information, so you could, you know, from wherever you're situated, just kind of stretch your arms back, stretch your arms up, get some energy flowing, right? Just allow yourself to take a little moment. I know this is a lot of information, but I'm really, really appreciating of how you all are engaging, right? Maybe this is an opportunity to just take a quick breath, inhaling in through the nose and exhaling out, right? Maybe this is your time of the day to take up your own space, right? To take a little break, take a pause as we continue our conversation. So take your last stretch, sip of water, sip of coffee, sip of tea, whatever you're sitting with today. Thank you for your engagement and hoping to hear from more of you as we continue to talk about combating imposter phenomenon, right? So take 1 more minute to yourself, stretching, right? Working on your energy, getting ready to engage. I'm excited to hear from more of you and really appreciative of the folks who've been in the comments, right? And remember, there is a survey at the end of our session today, so stay tuned as we would love your feedback. All right, let's move on to that next slide. So strategies, right? We talked about imposter phenomenon, how it impacts our mental health, what it feels like in the classroom, some history behind this term, right? But let's get into how do we combat this thing, right? Next slide. Okay, so first things first, how do we know when it is showing up, right? So these are some questions I want you all to think about to yourselves around when do I know it's showing up, right? From a mind-body connection standpoint. Where do I feel imposter phenomenon in my body, right? Where do I feel that in my body? And think about where you experience stress, right? So for example, I experience a lot of stress up here, right? In my neck area down to the shoulders, right? That could very much be where imposter phenomenon, that signal might show up for me, right? Think about when you're feeling anxious. Where in your body do you know, okay, I'm feeling anxious? That too could be an indicator that imposter phenomenon could be showing up there, right? Could be in your gut area, your stomach area, right? That queasy feeling that's showing up. Where do you feel that feeling of imposter? Right. So breathing techniques can help you connect with, listen, and soothe these feelings. Right. So think about that experience of imposter phenomenon, whether it's isolation, whether you're feeling nervous, you don't want to speak up, you're feeling inferior. You can breathe into that feeling, right? To help you self soothe, to help you get some clarity, right? One of my favorite breathing exercises is the 4-7-8 breathing exercise. Breathing in for 4 seconds, hold for that 7 seconds. So breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 7 seconds, and then releasing full breath 8 out through the mouth, right? It helps you soothe that feelings of anxiety, helps you find a sense of clarity, and also helps you come back a little bit more restored in the moment, right? So that's a breathing exercise you can take away and use if you're feeling imposter and you can connect with your body in that way, right? Now think about what assignments, tasks, or exams might trigger the imposter, right? Is it labs? Is it papers, term papers? Is it dissertation, right? What particular assignments, tasks, or exams trigger the imposter? Makes you feel like a fraud, makes you feel like you don't belong, right? And what are your thoughts when you're feeling challenged in subject areas or in assignments? So whatever that challenge is, what's happening to your thoughts, what's coming up for you as you're engaging in those assignments, right? So one of my tips is take a break during your assignments, study in increments, like 45-minute increments, and then study with a hype team, right? Folks who can encourage you, energize you, right? You can have a supportive space to talk about where your challenges might be, right? And the third piece is thinking about how you respond to positive feedback. Are you just dismissing it? One of the ways in which you know imposter phenomenon is showing up is if it's hard for you to receive affirmations or praise because you're in such a place of self-doubt, right? How do you self-celebrate when you accomplish milestones, right? So on my end, I recently passed a pretty big exam. And I really had to sit with myself on self celebrating instead of just moving on to the next thing, pretending like it didn't happen, right? Because a part of maybe my imposter phenomenon was showing up here, right? Think about how you respond when your peers or fellow cohort members experience success, right? Be real with yourself. Are you jealous, right? Are you comparing yourself to them? Right? Are you feeling invisible? Are you feeling like you want to be acknowledged? Right? Or does it motivate you? Right? So, this is an opportunity for you to make your accomplishments visible. You don't have to move on without acknowledging your win and to share your win with others. Right? So, when I was able to pass my test, I shared my wins with the community who supported me. Right? So, in the chat, if folks can share, what questions or what's coming up for you in this slide, right? It would be really helpful for me to know how do you know when your imposter phenomenon is showing up, right? Are you connected to the body piece? Is it around your task and assignments or your sense of self-celebration, right? These 3 areas can tell you when imposter phenomenon is showing up. Okay, so I'll pause here for about 5 seconds. If anyone wants to chime in, right? So this is about listening to your body, listening to the action and the celebration piece. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so I have come up with an acronym that's backed by some imposter phenomenon research that we've heard from the video, that we've heard from the testimonials, my own experience and the experience that I'm hearing here, right? This is called the SEEK acronym to combat the imposter, right? So S starts with say your affirmations and practice positive self-talk. We'll get into each of these. E is engage and find your community. The next E is elevate your current qualities, skills, and talents. And K is know and affirm your worth, right? Seek. It's a really simple acronym. So your takeaway today can be this very simple acronym, right? So let's get into the S. Say your affirmations and practice positive self-talk. Next slide. Okay. So say your affirmations and practice positive self-talk. So what is an affirmation? An affirmation is a positive statement, a way to hype yourself up, and an opportunity to reflect back what you want to see or feel, right? So affirmations often start with I am, I can, and I will, right? If we think back to the testimonial, they were saying, I am capable, you are capable, right? I belong here, right? I can do this, right? So create a routine to recite positive statements, right? So sometimes I have affirmations on my computer so I can see them, or in the bathroom, right? Maybe you want to say affirmations during a big stressful moment like exams or labs or tests, right? Affirmations is a great practice to where you're feeling energized, motivated, confident, right? So whatever those imposter phenomenon feelings are, you can combat it. Like the video said, it might not be able to go away. These feelings are reoccurring. Everyone experiences them at some point or another, but affirmations are proven to help you increase your self-esteem, become more energized to pursue that task or that skill or in that role, right? And it's a great tool, again, in the long run to help you continue to seek opportunities and apply for those opportunities, right? Especially if you're not feeling worthy. All right, so that's say your affirmations and practice that positive self-talk. Let's move on to our E. E, engage and find your community. So let's remember that in the testimonials, they talked about finding the folks that really support you, that can hear you out, that relate to your experiences. So this looks like connecting with other medical students of color, creating affinity groups or support groups. And these are groups that basically are safe spaces, whether it's cultural background, whether it's just lived experience, to support you in pursuing your academic studies and beyond, right? So creating some support groups, building positive, encouraging study groups, right? Not tense, not competitive, right? Not those spaces that reinforce the imposter, but positive, encouraging study groups. I encourage y'all to build this hype team, right? How can you create an environment where folks are really elevating each other? Talking openly and honestly about major stressors of medical school. We don't have to keep this to ourselves, right? These are feelings that are very common. So it is important to be as honest as possible around when this imposter is showing up, right? And again, joining efforts and initiatives to increase representation with your campus. So Black Girl, White Coat, they talked about mentorship opportunities, panels, conversations like this, right? You're going to be able to take these skills to your communities, your campus, your educational setting, and share with others, right? So that's our first E, engage and find your community. Let's go to the next E. Okay, elevate your current qualities, skills, and talents, right? You might feel those imposter phenomenon feelings in regards to maybe a specific area in your experience in medical school and beyond, right? But think about what's brought you here in this academic journey, right? What brought you here? What got you here, right? What skills, qualities, or talents got you here already? And what are the skills that you are proud of that supports this academic journey, right? And reflect on a time that you overcame a challenge. How did you get through the situation, right? So think about all the skills and strengths you currently have. You must have used one or many of them to get to this point, right? So I want to check in on the chat. I want to check in on how you all are doing as we're going through this acronym, and we're here at the Elevate Your Current Qualities, Skills, and Talents. What are you all thinking about this, right? We got through the first S, E, and E of Seek. Just want to check in and hear how you are feeling, what's resonating with you. And I'll pause here. Pause here for a moment. All are a little quiet. I hope that means you're thinking. I hope that means you're reflecting, and that's okay too. But waiting for maybe one voice to chime in on Yeah, how are you feeling about this acronym so far? What's showing up for you? Give it 5 seconds here. Okay, let's go to that next acronym, that next letter. And that's our K. Know your worth and release your subtype. So again, we're bringing back the subtypes from the beginning, right? So it's that perfectionism, the superhero, the individualist, the natural genius, the expert, right? So release perfectionism by setting realistic goals, right? Sometimes we harp on tasks and responsibilities because we haven't set a goal or an intention around what we want to accomplish, right? Or what we want to get done or what makes us feel accomplished. So this requires us to set some realistic goals. Release that superhero and the individualist by asking for help and collaborating with others, right? So these are two that go together because they both trigger this feeling of like, I have to do it all on my own. I have to prove myself, right? But release that by asking for help and collaborating with others as a means to let that go, right? Let it go. Releasing the natural genius by embracing your different learning styles, right? So this combats the idea that you have to naturally be good at something or you have to naturally kind of fall into this role or into know this assignment very well, right? But instead, you might need to incorporate different ways of learning, right? Maybe you can introduce visual learning if you're typically someone who doesn't learn that way, right? It is okay to embrace new skills and new ways of learning. You can also release the expert by affirming you know enough, right? You know enough. I know enough. I have this information, I have this new knowledge and that's enough for me in this moment, right? And remember to apply for opportunities that you may be doubting, right? Many medical students of color report that they wish they'd applied for more opportunities if their imposter hadn't gotten in the way, right? If their imposter hadn't gotten in the way, I would have applied for more opportunities. You got to release that expert, right? So this is our SEEK acronym, and this is a great way for you all to hold. How can I combat imposter phenomenon? Right, in a moment, how can I release these feelings and release this subtype that I traditionally kind of fall into, especially in school? And thank you, Stephen said, love the acronym. Yes, you could take this with you, right? And I know that you all will be able to replay this and look back on this recording. So this resource will definitely be here. Okay. All right, let's go to our next slide. All right. So we're just going to take a mindful moment from wherever you are, to reflect on your imposter phenomenon, right? And this is inviting a little bit of journaling and writing time. So whether you have pen and paper, whether you have like notes or sticky tabs on your computer, whatever it is, we're just going to take some grounding time to do a little bit of writing and reflecting on your experience of imposter phenomenon and everything that we're learning today, right? So you can choose one prompt. Number one is, which areas of SEEK would you like to practice to help release your imposter phenomenon, right? Number two is, think more about your subtype. Remember those subtypes of imposter phenomenon. What is one way you can release that subtype of imposter phenomenon? One way. Remember, we got some resources, right? Number three, think back to the testimonials. What is 1 to 2 takeaways from the testimonials that you relate to, right? So the first one asks you to think about SEEK. The second one asks you to think about those subtypes. Third one asks you to reflect on those testimonials. So we're actually going to have some downtime, play a little bit of music. I'm going to actually give you all a couple of minutes to just sink into this moment. Give yourself some grounding downtime, reflect on the information, and then we will come back and hopefully there'll be some folks who are willing to share and we can talk more about our experiences. Okay, so let's cue the music for a couple of minutes and have this time, and these prompts will be up on the screen. Happy writing, happy reflecting. Thank you for being here.
my eyes. Fear in my mind is a warning. Pray to the one you're relying. I've been wandering all day. I tried to be fine, but I can't be. The noise in my mind wouldn't leave me. I tried to get by, but I'm burning. And behind my mind, it runs. All these thoughts have troubled me. Fighting to give up my pain. Fighting to be on my lane. My mind running to the other side. When it's time to leave my life. When it tries to take me out. Tell you what I need. Right, yeah. I really need time. I need to free my mind. I really need my mind. I need to free my mind now. I really need time. I need to free my mind. I really need my now. Oh, yeah. This is the peace that you cannot buy. Send me a love that you cannot mix. One is the joy that you cannot waste, and the other one price that you cannot fix. This is the peace that you cannot buy. Finding a way where you cannot see. Man with this system we cannot pray. I need to find relief. But behind my mind it runs. All these thoughts have troubled me. Fighting to give up my pain. Fighting to be on my lane. My mind running to the other side. When it's time to leave my life. When it tries to take me out. Tell you what I need. Right here, I really need my love. I need to free my mind. I really need I need to free my mind out. I really need.
Hope you all are enjoying some writing, some reflecting. I'm going to take a couple of more minutes. Thank you for engaging.
Set me free. Now I need to find relief. Set me to the open sky. Now I need to free my mind. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Hey, oh no. I might be falling deep. 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 Tell me now what you need. I've been going to God when I'm only my mind. I might be falling deep. Falling deep. I might be falling. I might be falling. I might be falling. I might be falling, yeah.
All right, let's wrap up our thoughts. Let's wrap up our thoughts. All right, I hope this was some good downtime for you to reflect on imposter phenomenon and 3 different areas that we discussed today. So I want to pause to see if anyone wants to share, or if you just kind of want to reflect a little bit on what you shared and hold some space for that. So whether you engaged in prompt 1 that focused on seek, 2 that focused on the subtype, 3 that focused on the testimonials, would just love a couple of words or affirmations or follow-up from you all in the chat. What came up for you? I got to do some reflection as well. What came up for you? Don't be shy. We are at the tail end of our session today. Take up space, right? Share your experiences. We got some good resources. Some good sharing today. I'm appreciative of the medical student who joined us, the recent PhD grad. I hope you're feeling accomplished. I'm hoping that you're able to sit with how imposter phenomenon shows up for you and some tools to combat it. Right? I'll hold some space for about 10 more seconds, encouraging you to take up some space wherever you are, right? So maybe taking up space means rereading what you wrote, rereading what you jotted down, right? What you're going to put into practice. Okay, this is your opportunity to share. Again, take up space. And take up space today and whatever that can look like for you. Okay. Got a comment. Really appreciate the whole webinar. I'm still working through imposter phenomenon, even in my new role. Definitely going to work on elevating my skills and abilities. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that and wishing you well and confidence in your new role, right? And I hope that with Seek and some of these other skills, you're able to apply that to your new role, right? You're able to use these skills to amplify, right, your sense of belonging, amplify your sense of skills and talents, right? So thank you for sharing that. And I hope that you're able to use these skills today, right? Think back on those testimonials, right? Thank you for sharing. I'll wait again for another comment. That was a really great comment. Thank you for your appreciation. Okay, pausing for a little bit more. I'm a therapist, so I'm used to silence, right? That means that you're thinking, that means you're reflecting, and it's all good. It is all good. Give it a couple more seconds, looking for another great comment like that one. Great reflection. One more person. Anyone else want to take up some space? Right, you deserve it. That medical student wants to chime in. The recent PhD grad wants to chime in. I'd love to hear your voice. Okay, well, let's move on, but there's still room to share your comments and your reflections here. Okay, next slide. Okay, so think about your affirmation of the day. And again, we're going to go back to some emojis, right? So a heart, a thumbs up, or that celebratory emoji, right? Which one do you want to take with you today? The heart says, I will release feeling like a fraud and affirm that I belong in my program or my community or my role, right? Thumbs up means I will release comparing myself to other students and my peers, right? Celebratory emoji, I will release feeling like my success is a coincidence and I will embrace my path as a medical student or a student, right? Or whatever community that you're in. Heart, thumbs up, or celebratory emoji, 1, 2, or 3. What affirmation do you want to take with you today? Right. So for the person who just chimed in about that new role, what affirmation do you want to take with you today? Right. For that medical student and that recent grad, which one would you like to take with you today to affirm yourself? Remember, the first letter of the SEEK acronym was say affirmations, practice that positive self-talk, right? 1, 2, or 3. I'll wait for a couple of folks to chime in. Which emoji? Which number? 1, 2, or 3. What affirmation are you choosing? I'll pause here. And remember, we have a survey at the end. Give your feedback. Okay. All right. Steven says the celebratory, right? Releasing, feeling like your success is just a coincidence and you'll embrace your path. Love that. Okay. Another person said the third one, yes, releasing, feeling like your success is a coincidence and embracing your path in your new role, right? Awesome. Awesome. That's excellent. Anyone else? What do you want to take with you today? This is a free affirmation, free affirmations, right? I think I'm going to take with me the second one, releasing comparing myself to others, right? Comparing my journey to someone else's, right? I want to wait for one more person, one more brave person who's going to take up some space. Please take up space. Just know you deserve it. You deserve this affirmation. 1, 2, or 3. Right? You could even take a picture of this. Like maybe you need this for later, right? Maybe you need to save these affirmations, and it's okay to create your own, right? 5 more seconds. Take up that space. Chime in wherever you are. All right. So I hope those affirmations resonate with you from wherever you are, right? And hope that you're reflecting on what you want to affirm for yourself and how you'll release imposter phenomenon. Okay, next slide. Okay, so any questions that you may be having, I want to just hold some space. If you have any questions for me, if you have any additional questions about imposter phenomenon, this is the time to ask your questions, right? There's been plenty of resources today. It's been a lot of information, and hopefully from wherever you're located, whether you're a medical student of color, whether you are in another program, right, in the graduate program, I hope that this information resonated with you in some way, right? Any questions that you might be having. And all of the videos are really easy to find on YouTube, and I know that this will be up on the website, and you'll be able to review this webinar. Any questions? Just want to hold some space for that. Any questions, reflections, any comments? Okay, give it around 10 more seconds. Thank you all for your engagement, for showing up from wherever you are. We're grateful to have you with us today. I'm grateful to be in space with you today. Okay, let's move on. All right, so some takeaways for today, takeaways and some gems of the day. Imposter phenomenon is prevalent amongst medical students of color, right? So this is just a ongoing experience, right? It's universal, it's felt by everyone, right? And it's a common experience amongst medical students of color. There are different types of subtypes of imposter phenomenon that show up in the medical school setting as well. So we talked about those different subtypes, right? You are not alone in this imposter phenomenon feeling. You are not alone. I don't want you walking away from this thinking that something's wrong with you or your experience is not felt. No. The takeaway today is that you've heard from so many different voices, right, including your own, around how folks experience imposter phenomenon, especially in medical school, right? So just know you are not alone in this. I even shared about some of my experiences today, right? And by utilizing SEEK, that acronym, you can become more mindful about releasing imposter phenomenon and recognizing your worth in medical school or your program or a new role, right? So you can use SEEK anywhere where imposter phenomenon shows up. You also have some skills on how to identify how imposter phenomenon might show up in your body, right? How imposter phenomenon shows up with certain tasks and responsibilities and assignments, right? And then thinking about imposter phenomenon as a part of self-celebration, right? How do you show up and celebrate yourself? So I think we gained a lot of skills today, and I'm grateful to have been here with you to walk us through this experience of imposter phenomenon, but most of all, how to combat it, right? Next slide. Okay, so now we will take a moment to complete the survey, which will be in the chat. So if you can click on that survey link in the chat, that would be great. And give us some feedback, right? What are your thoughts, right? What were your reflections? What were some new learnings of the day, right? What really resonated with you? And you'll have a moment to do this and take this time. And we can even, pause here, play a little music. I'm here with you in this moment. And this is a space to continue to engage in the chat, but this is your opportunity to complete that survey, okay? It has been a pleasure being with you all today. I'm really grateful for the engagement. I hope that there were opportunities to learn about yourself, your communities, the folks who support you from medical school and beyond, right? So this is your opportunity to share and to reflect on your experience today in this webinar. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending, for taking up space, for reflecting, right? For viewing, for engaging with me and others in this space. Okay, make sure you fill out that survey. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. Thank you to the Steve Fund for this amazing opportunity. And on the next slide, you will find the contact information of the Steve Fund, the social media handles, my information. Please stay connected, right? This is the opportunity for you to connect, ask more questions, seek resources, okay? I see a question here. What can institutions do to help students navigate imposter phenomenon and even reduce the experience of it for students? Well, I think that, thank you for this question. This is really great. Using some of the tools today, if you even think around Seek, right? And when we think about connecting with community, right? So institutions can play a big part in curating and creating spaces of community with and for students, safe spaces where they can talk about imposter phenomenon, right? So whether it could be encouraging conversations like this, support groups or affinity groups, building those within programs can be really helpful in reducing the experience of imposter phenomenon, right? And also making sure that you're an advocate on amplifying student voices. So this can look like one of those other suggestions where joining advocacy groups, increasing representation and retention of students of color on campus and medical students of color on campus, right? So are there efforts to show up in those retention efforts areas, right? And also, how do you show up for students in the classroom, right? Are you amplifying the voices of students of color in medical school and beyond? Right. So I hope that helped to answer that question. As the acronym and some of the tools today, if you tap into those, you can apply it to your institution. So I hope that answered your question. Okay. And the Steve Fund just posted a link around great back to school toolkit resources for educators and institutions. So please check that out. That is a link that was just posted in the chat, right? That's a great resource to help support students and students of color in the classroom. Right, so I hope that answered your question. Thank you for that. Really, really great question. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes, check out those resources. And if you follow the Steve Fund on Instagram, there are plenty of opportunities to engage into some back to school programming, and this could be really helpful. Okay. All right. So I hope that you all are continuing to fill out that survey. We're going to take about 2 more minutes before we end this webinar. And again, there are some great resources that are in the chat. Please fill out that survey. Please take down our social media handles and ways to contact us. Stay connected to the Steve Fund for more awesome programming, especially during this fall season. Okay. Take that one last minute to soak in everything you've learned, one last minute to complete that survey, one last minute to take down the contact information, right? Thank you for showing up. And showing up for yourselves, showing up for other students of color, other medical students, right? Showing up for your imposter phenomenon and how you can combat it today. Thank you so much for your time. And that is going to conclude our session together. Take care And I hope that you all are able to combat your imposter phenomenon in whatever way possible today. And please stay connected. Thank you all.